Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we have an Audi A1 in for an exterior detail and a single stage machine polish. This customer had the unfortunate trip of going down a narrow country lane recently and as a result had a lot of minor scratches in the side of the bodywork, down both sides, mainly from trees and branches. The customer lives out of town and was leaving in around 2 days after this detail was scheduled, so it was a bit of a last minute job for both the customer and myself. As you can see, very visible but not super impactful to the paintwork. You can also see some general swirling in the paint, some swirl marks, possibly created by an improper wash technique, or it's also likely that this car has not seen a detail or paint correction in some years. So to begin, we're starting off on the wheels and we're going in with some iron fallout remover. This is called Iron X, this particular one from CarPro. And the idea with this product is that it's just going to slowly break down any bonded metal contamination, such as iron, and will eventually react and turn purple to let us know that that has taken place. I'm just pre-cleaning the tyres with a generic wheel cleaner. So after we let that sit for a few minutes, we're going to use the rotating water attachment on the Kerscher. This is a recent upgrade of mine and it has made a significant difference in the amount of time it takes me to clean wheel arches. This also provides a much better clean than I could do with a brush. So you can see the colour of that water down at the bottom. This is a really good attachment, it just gets everything out very quickly as well. The rear arches of this A1 were also carpet lined. Anybody knows that's cleaned these knows how much of a nightmare it can be to get these looking really good. And this attachment does a really quick and efficient job. It's not something I would use on paintwork, but I would always use it on wheels now. I tend to stand back a bit to rinse the wheels off because it is very powerful. So again, we're going in for our contact clean with, again, this generic wheel cleaner. We're just going to put a bit of snow foam over there as well, just for a bit of extra lubricity. The pre-clean of the wheels has actually tidied up most of the faces, so there isn't really much to do in this mechanical agitation phase. This is a generic wheel cleaner I've used a few times from a local shop. Seems to do the job. It's not super powerful, but it gets the job done pretty well. I don't think that these barrels have been cleaned for a long time, judging by all the chocolate milk coming out. In an ideal world I would have done a second pass on the wheels, but we were time bound to a day to a day and a half, so these weren't really a priority. It was just a question of getting them looking somewhat presentable and then moving on to the rest of the detail. So for the pre-cleaning phase, the pre-rinse phase, we're using a citrus-based pre-cleaner. This particular one is from a company called Easy Car Care. I think you say it is Easy, EZ, I'm not really sure. This was diluted about 10 to 1 in a spray bottle. I've used this several times before. Tends to do the job very nicely. Again, this car wasn't too heavily soiled, but because we're machine polishing, we really wanted to make sure that we got the paint as contaminant free and clean as possible. just going to layer over the top of that a thick layer of snow foam. It was supposed to be about 20 degrees on the day I filmed this, so we started nice and early. What with it being a black car and all, we didn't want anything to sort of dry on the paint, so I used a snow foam just to let that citrus pre-rinse dwell a bit longer, work into the surface and soften up that dirt to be rinsed off. This particular snow foam, I believe, is from turtle wax, and it's pH neutral. It's not super powerful, but it works well when it's combined with a more powerful citrus pre-cleaner. So just helps to flush out all the nooks and crannies that perhaps the citrus might not get into. So here I'm using a detailing brush just to sort of work all the panel gaps and tight spots that may not be reached with a mitt in the subsequent contact wash phases. It's generally quite standard practice for me, but especially when performing a machine polish, it's really important that you work the smaller areas and the tighter areas just to loosen up as much dirt as you can. Because what you'll often find is when you've dried the car, the vibrations from the polisher itself may dislodge dirt particles which may then get stuck in your pads, which could inflict some more further marring and may interfere with your polishing process as well if they get stuck in the pads. So it's really important as a general rule of thumb, but in particular in this case as well, to really work all of those tight areas. Make sure you can get any moss or algae or just general dirt out of those tight spots. So usually I tend to use music in my videos as opposed to narration. It's just general preference personally. There was lots of bird song in the air and it was generally just a really nice quieter day, so I thought I'd bring you along for that. Do let me know what you think in the comments if you prefer sort of spoken through narrated videos or whether you prefer just something a bit more relaxing. So I decided to go with a bit more of an abrasive method for the contact wash today, using a bit more of an abrasive wash mitt that you can see there. I didn't really see the point in using a 2 bucket method here with a soft mitt because the paint was quite heavily contaminated, hadn't really been corrected either, and that was the objective of today's job anyway. So I thought I'd save on a bit of water. So we're going with a single bucket, but still with a grit guard, and a bit more of an abrasive mitt. This is from Turtle Wax again, I believe. Fibres are just a bit harder than the wash mitts that I tend to use on cars that aren't too swirled or cars that have been corrected and protected. Again, this is quite a generic shampoo that I got from a local store. It works quite well. I have to use quite a lot, to be honest, but I get nice suds and it gives good lubricity, so I'm quite happy with it for the time being. So even though we're going with perhaps a less thorough method of contact washing today, purely because it's not necessary, it's still good to employ the basics and common practice when you're contact washing your car. So if possible, always try and wash your paintwork in straight lines, whether up and down or side to side. If you can avoid cleaning your car in circular motions, that's most preferable, because otherwise you can increase the risk of adding swirl marks to your paint, because if you do pick up any dirt in your mitt or your sponge, you will move it around in a circular motion, which is caught by the eye that bit easier, whereas if it's in straight lines, again, it's that bit more difficult to see. So a bit of a different approach for today's job, but employing those same basics. So, sparing you another rinse, we're moving on to the decontamination phase of this wash. This is a crucial phase when you're performing a machine polish, purely because you want to remove any decontamination within the clear coat before you start polishing, or certainly as much of it as possible. So here we're using the same iron fallout remover that we used on the wheels. This is paint safe. It will also do the same job of removing any embedded iron contamination within the clear coat, which if you leave over a certain period of time could help contribute to rust, small patches of rust in your car, as those iron particles will react with the oxygen on the surface. So it's good to do this practice, even if you're not machine polishing your paint, maybe once a year, perhaps more if you live in areas where iron contamination could be more of a problem, such as if you live near a train line or a train station where you get a lot of trains braking and a lot of iron in the air as a result that might fall onto your vehicle. Absolutely stinks. It really does. It's horrible. It's also worth mentioning that this is a product that you should not let dry in the sun. But although you couldn't see it here, I am rinsing panel by panel as I go to make sure that this doesn't happen. Usually you'd let it sit for maybe 4 to 5 minutes at the most, but because we're working outside in not great conditions because of the sun, I had to rinse off after a minute really at the most, just to be on that safe side, because you don't want any chemical staining in your paintwork. Following the rinse and the iron decontamination, we're then going to move on to the mechanical decontamination. I'm using a clay bar here with a bit of shampoo as lubricant, and the clay bar will remove any bonded contaminants out of the clear coat that the washing process alone will fail to do. Things like tree sap, smaller flecks of tar, and general road grime that just won't come out from just rinsing and washing alone. This is extremely crucial when you're doing a machine polish, because if you don't, again, your polishing pads will pick up all the bonding contaminants within and on the surface of the clear coat and sort of just mush them around really as you carry on with your job. Now, depending on where you live and where your vehicle is based, this is a job that you may want to do perhaps every time you change your oil, maybe once a year or something like that. It's not something you need to do all the time, as this will induce a bit of marring to the paintwork. Of course you're removing bonding contaminants, but at the same time the clay is also an abrasive. So generally speaking, it's good to either use a very mild clay, or in this case you do a quick correction afterwards to remove that marring that the clay bar has inflicted on the paintwork. So as you can see, we're all clean and decontaminated. There is a fair amount of swirling present in the paint, which we will try to remove. There's also, as you can see, a bit of marring from the clay bar, but that will come out quite easily with the machine polish step. I found what I also think might be perhaps some chemical staining, some mild chemical staining in the paintwork from a previous wash process. So we will also aim to remove some of that with the machine polishing. So we're going with a fine cut pad from Koch Chemie, and we're using an all-in-one compound and polish from Auto Finesse. Admittedly, I didn't actually have the time to film this polishing process because it was a rather hot day and I was working on black paint, and with the job being so time critical, it was necessary that I just sort of cracked on and got the job done without the additional need to film it all. I do, however, have some nice before and after shots. So with this single stage polish, we're going with a very light pad. This pad is for light cutting or finishing, and this is an all-in-one compound, so the idea being that it can remove swirls and defects but also finish down to a near perfect finish, which doesn't require further enhancement. This is ideal if your car isn't too heavily swirled, if you don't have much contamination in your clear coat. And as it's a daily driver, it would be perhaps unrealistic to expect a daily turnaround of near perfection. So we'll do the best that we can. So as you can see, the polishing actually went into the next day just to clean up everything that we needed to, and the paint looks a lot better. The lighting does flatter to deceive because it's black paintwork. It tends to absorb all of the colours and it can be hard to see. There is in fact still some swirl marks, some imperfections in the paint, but because of the lighting it's very difficult to see that on black paint. But we managed to remove the vast majority of the scratches that were put in following that excursion up the country lane, and we also sealed in the finish with a light paint sealant that should last for about 2 months. These are some of the before and afters on the wheels and the bodywork. So thank you very much to everyone who has watched the video. Feel free to like and subscribe if you like what you see, and stay around for some more content, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers guys.